Hello, and welcome to the 1840 podcast, where each month we explore a different topic balancing modern sensibilities with traditional sensitivities to give you new approaches to timeless Jewish ideas. I'm your host, David Beshefkin, and this month we're exploring the topic of Teshuva. This series has been generously sponsored by our dearest friends, Daniel and Mira Stokar. Thank you so much for your sponsorship and for your friendship. This podcast is part of a larger exploration of those big, juicy Jewish ideas, so be sure to check out 1840.org. That's 18forty.org, where you can also find videos, articles, and recommended readings. Right as I sat down to record the intro for this episode, I got an email, and to me, in many ways, it relates quite deeply with everything that we are discussing in what I think is one of the most riveting and in many ways painful, and in many other ways beautiful and uplifting conversations that we've had on 1840. But this is the email that I received. Dear David, called me David, not David. But I think it's more of a David kind of guy. You'll see in a moment. But sometimes for the more David kind of guys, they call me David. It's like my nephew in Israel. I have a Haredi nephew in Israel who I love deeply named Shaya. And for some reason, without being prompted by anyone, everybody else in my family calls me David, and he calls me David. I think he's onto something. The email begins, Dear David, I can't believe I'm even sending this. I have only listened to 1.5 shows so far, but in the second one I was listening to, the one with Malka Simkovich, you read an email from someone. That person had issues he was dealing with, but really he just wanted to put them on paper and send them to someone. Recently, I've had issues with Judaism, and I never sat down to really think them over. I was inspired by that email to do so here goes. My issue is that I have no motivation and I just don't want to do Judaism. Some background about me. I am part of the quote-unquote yeshivish community. I went to a yeshivish-based medrash until I got married at the age of 23. I was a serious guy in yeshiva. I always went to Seder on time. I never missed davening, etc. But now I am 27, only a few years since yeshiva, and I don't really care for Judaism. I still try to daven with a minyan, set aside time for learning every day, and generally keep the Torah. However, I have a hard time pushing myself to learn or go to minyanim or just care about keeping the mitzvos. Thinking back to when I was more serious, I mostly did things out of guilt or because it was the right thing to do. Since I left yeshiva, I've enjoyed life a lot more. I didn't realize it at the time, but yeshiva gave me anxiety, and I really did not belong being there. Now I'm a software engineer. I own a house, and I enjoy doing things not Judaism related. This makes it hard to care about Judaism. I would always rather be doing other things. Over time, I slowly got rid of my Jewish guilt, which I don't think is a good thing anyway. And now, because I like doing other things more, I find it very difficult to push myself to do the right thing. I came up with a line a few months ago that I always rattle around my head and think it captures my feelings. No one ever said Judaism is supposed to be easy, but why is it always the thing I don't want to do? My life got happier, basically because I stopped caring so much about Judaism. My biggest question at this point is, where do I go from here? Am I supposed to do Musar and try to get back my Jewish guilt? Or am I supposed to find something in Judaism that talks to me and gives me an emotional connection to Judaism, one I never had? I don't expect an answer, especially because you don't know me, and it would be hard to give someone advice you don't know anything about. But it was nice to be able to organize my thoughts and put them on paper. Thank you. P.S. I don't expect you to read this, but if you do, I am okay with it being read in public, but not with my name, which of course I have not included. First and foremost, it is a privilege of a lifetime, and I always get somewhat emotional even when I say it, to be invited into the interiority, the intimate spaces of people's religious lives, into the spaces of people's identity. It is not something I will ever in my entire life take for granted, because I believe that these questions and these feelings, what we are grappling, whether it is with our religious life, with our personal lives, with our family lives, this is life. This is what makes life. And there is nothing more essential, there is nothing more important than recognizing, articulating, and grappling with these issues. The person who sent the email is absolutely right. I'll be honest, I have not yet responded, though I assume when this episode finally launches, I will have responded by then. I try to respond to everybody who reaches out, and I'm so blessed that so many within the 1840 community do reach out. But he's right. I'm not going to offer any specific specific program. I'm not going to offer any specific regimen. It's not like a diet, but I think in many ways this episode addresses, I think, the underlying feelings in some ways that this person may have. It reminds me of a Twitter poll that was created by a dear friend and essential member of the 1840 team, and that person is Yehuda Fogel, who sends our weekly emails, which Lord knows if you haven't signed up for those, I don't know what to tell you. Please sign up for our emails. It really does mean a great deal. You can get them on our website. There's a subscribe button, 1840.org, 18forty.org. And our friend Yehuda Fogel, who on Twitter goes by @Yehuda HaMaccabi. That's a terrible name to give over. Yehuda is spelled Yehuda, HaMaccabi, HaMaccabi. And let me warn our listeners, he shares some pretty weird stuff on Twitter. He knows it, I know it, and now you all know it. We love Yehuda nonetheless, but he shared something, a Twitter poll, where you can take a poll on social media about what people think, that was extraordinarily provocative and also profound and also quite simple. He wrote as follows: should Judaism be, and then he gave two choices, hard or easy? Should Judaism be hard or easy? And I'll let you take a moment while you are listening to think, what do you think the answer is? Now, I like Twitter polls that don't include, I like polls in general that don't include a both. Of course there is a both. Of course both is always the answer. We are Jews after all. We always want a little bit of both. We always want a little bit of our cake and we want to eat it too. But he didn't give that as a choice. At its core, should Judaism be hard or should it be easy? Close to 700 people participated in this poll. It's surely not scientific, but I think it's a very profound question. It's a question that I think a lot of people think about in their religious lives. And I will tell you now, I hope you're holding the answer in your head. The answer that won by an fairly overwhelming majority, 64% of respondents compared to a 36%. 64% of the respondents said Judaism should be hard. And I understand exactly what they are coming from and where they are coming from. It is like the great quote that Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sacks says, and that was shared by our friend Rabbi Akiva Block of Tenafly, where Rabbi Sacks writes, we value most what costs us the most. Things that are hard, things that we invest in, things that we take seriously are the things that have the most transformative aspect in our lives. It's why Rabbi Sacks mentions why the holiday of Pesach, which is the most difficult to prepare for. What's more difficult than getting your house ready for Passover? You have to clean the house, you have to buy matzahs, you have to get new dishes and all of these things, yet it is the most popular holiday among the Jewish people. We value most what costs us most. But if you will allow me, and of course there is an element of both, I would like, and I think much of what underlies this episode is a defense of the response that Judaism should be easy. When I say easy, anything that you invest in and have a lifelong practice in obviously is not going to be entirely easy. But what I think of in the question of Judaism being easy and Judaism being hard is really the question of, should Judaism fit your life? You know, I think a lot of times the imagery, I have young children, none of them are quite at the age, some are too old and one is too young, but they play the game where you have to kind of fit the shapes into the right hole, and you have the oval and the triangle, and sometimes for the more advanced kids they have a star, and you have to match up the shapes of the blocks into the holes, and this, thank God, occupies children for hours at times. And I think very often we play this game with our religious lives. We try to fit a certain model of commitment into our own internal lives, and sometimes those models match up, sometimes those models don't match up, and sometimes, and I think most frequently, a model that fit at a certain point in our lives no longer fits later in our lives. If we believe that we are evolving, if we believe that the shape, the contours of our religious commitment is always evolving and moving, then by nature, kind of the whole, so to speak, in the analogy is evolving as well, and therefore the shape that aligns to it and the Jewish commitment and the contours of that commitment evolve as well. And I believe that very often in life, the pain that people go through, and I'm sure in some ways this is underlying the person in this email. There was a point in their life where maybe yeshiva life, he says that it was always angst-ridden, which is never a good thing. But there may have been a point in his life where it did fit. And now he's at a later point in his life. He's built a home. He's independent. And those earlier commitments now need to evolve. That doesn't mean necessarily that they need to weaken, but there needs to be an alignment. The question in my mind of should Judaism be hard or easy can be interpreted in many ways. The interpretation that I prefer most is, should it fit? Should our Judaism fit? And I believe over the long-term course of our lives, we need to find a Yiddishkeit that fits our lives. That doesn't mean we need to avoid being exposed to different varieties and to slowly grow and to aspire into something else. In many ways, this is the conversation that we had with Dr. Agnes Callard from the University of Chicago of how aspiration works, how aspiring to something that you are not yet and you may want to become, how that process works and how it parallels in many ways the process of teshuvah. That episode, of course, is part of our teshuvah series from last year. But I think more than anything else, your Yiddishkeit needs to fit your life. You need to find a set of commitments that you can take with you, not for 6 months, not for 10 days, not for an intense month, but that you can take and nurture and be nourished by over the course of your lifetime. And I think very often we feel locked into a certain particular set of commitments, sometimes that are not enough and sometimes that are too much, that can either suffocate or become so shallow and superficial that there's not enough to really cultivate a nourishing religious life. There's a beautiful idea that I heard from a friend of the show. His name is Jacob Shoulder. He may kill me for mentioning his name. He reminded me of this idea that he heard from Rabbi Meish Tarragon of Gush. And it's an absolutely beautiful idea, and I'm indebted both to Jacob's friendship and for sharing this idea with me. We say in davening during Ma'ariv, in the bracha of Hashkivenu, there is a beautiful prayer that I will say in Hebrew and then, of course, translate. We ask, V'haser Satan milfanenu umeacharenu, that we remove the Satan, the negative qualities in our life, the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclinations, whatever you want to call it, that it should be removed milfanenu umeacharenu, from before us and from behind us. And the question that so many people ask is, what does it mean? What is the evil that lurks in front of you, and what is the evil that lurks behind you? And what Jacob told me in the name of Rabbi Meish Tarragon, dare I say a friend? You know what? I take that back. We're not really friends. We've spoken twice on the phone in the spirit of friendship, but we are not friends. But he said an absolutely jaw-dropping and beautiful idea, and he's always an astounding thinker. He said there are two types of evil inclinations. There is a Yetzer Hara. There's an evil inclination that is in front of you. It is trying to get you to stumble. It is trying to get you to sin. It is trying to get you to sleep in late, to miss prayers, to miss davening, to violate Shabbos. Wherever you are, there is a Yetzer Hara. There's an evil inclination. There are desires that are in front of you. What is the Yetzer Hara behind you that we pray to be taken away? Rabbi Meish Tarragon said something absolutely astounding. V'haser satan milfanenu me'acharenu, the Yetzer Hara that is behind us is the Yetzer Hara that is always pushing us, feeling to do more and to take on more and to go higher and higher. And sometimes that also can be a Yetzer Hara, the Yetzer Hara that never allows us to be comfortable or fully embodied in the moment and in the Yiddishkeit that we have at this moment. That you always feel there's somebody behind you, pushing you, and you never feel any sense of serenity, any sense of peace, any sense of dignity in your present religious life. And that also can be a Yetzer Hara. It's not the Yetzer Hara in front of you trying to get you to sin. It's the Yetzer Hara pushing you behind you, always trying to do more and never allowing you a moment of nourishment and contentment with your own religious life. And I think a lot of people grapple with that. And obviously it is a very thin line. We're always looking to grow. We're always looking to develop. But it cannot be at the expense of having a nourishment flourishing religious life. It cannot be at the expense of having a misaligned religious life. I remember my Rebbe in Ner Yisrael, Rav Ezra Neuberger, one time said about teshuvah, and I've probably said this before and it's always stuck with me. He said, teshuvah, the main focus of our teshuvah always needs to be teshuvah on our expectations. That very often we have expectations of ourselves that are too low, and quite often we have expectations of ourselves that are too high, that are pushing further and further. And that can be the Yetzer Hara that lurks not only in front of us, but also pushing from behind. And that is why I am so excited today to share our conversation with Kayla Haber-Goldstein, who wrote the book published by Mosaica Press, Questioning the Answers. It is a very raw, a very honest, and very authentic story about somebody whose path to teshuvah was about finding a way to have Judaism be aligned in her life and to reconcile not just the Yetzer Hara in front of her, but V'hasar Satan me'acharenu. I am so excited to have a guest whose book I came across, but it wasn't through the book. It was from really family connections. I know your brother-in-law, I know your brothers, I know your family. It is our privilege and pleasure to have Kayla Haber-Goldstein.
Hi.
I'm so excited to have this conversation with you. You wrote a book called Questioning the Answers, and I'm almost less interested in the book, and I'm more interested in what was the journey that led you to writing this book. And maybe we'll get to it in a moment. The most interesting thing about your book, and I always love acronyms. I love the Jewish acronyms. Like every outreach organization has like JWOW, J Swipe,
yeah,
J
they're
this.
like a shetevot.
Yeah, all they love that. And you have such fascinating acronyms after your name. When I first saw it, I'm like, is she a therapist? Like, what therapy is that? It says FFB/BT.
Yeah.
From birth.
Baal Teshuva.
Baal Teshuva.
Yeah.
There's both in there.
Because I'm both.
And that really sums up your journey in a way.
Yeah.
You are a Baalas Teshuva in a way, and you were raised, obviously, in a
Very
frum
frum,
home.
yeah.
So why don't we start, where were you raised?
So my father's a rabbi, very big rabbi, so we moved around a lot.
Can we say his name, or
Yeah,
we'll
he's
just have
Rabbi
people
Yaakov
Google
Haber.
it?
No,
Rabbi Yaakov.
Yeah, no, we can say his name. He's
Yeah.
proud of me. I was born in Australia. He was a rabbi in Australia, so I was
Where in
born
Australia?
in Melbourne. I
Australia's
love Australia.
beautiful.
Australia is beautiful.
Gorgeous.
It's a stunning country. So I was born there, and then we moved to Muncie, and my father was the Rav of Beis Torah in Muncie.
Okay.
And then when I was 10 years old, my parents made Aliyah. So I lived in, I went to Matastar for elementary school. So it's like
Matasdorf is not like a
Mea
Dati Leumi
Sharim.
community.
No, it's like Mea Sharim, but like one step lower. So not Hasidish and
Yes.
not like, covering my face, but it was pretty intense.
What years were you in Matasdorf education? How old were you?
So it was from 4th grade to 8th grade.
And it's obviously in Hebrew.
Yeah.
And you're coming from Melbourne and Muncie.
Right.
Not a typical...
Not a typical journey. Very different culturally. I was in a terrace, which was like 10 girls in my class and
In
very
Muncie.
like emotionally healthy. And then we like moved to Israel and there were 35 girls in my class and I didn't speak Hebrew. And it was like a very jarring transition. So I didn't do so well.
Let's not sugarcoat anything. You're a pre-adolescent.
Yeah.
You're in Matasdorf. I mean, that is socially, it's just absolute upheaval. Like you've been turned upside
So
down.
it happens to be that socially it was amazing for me.
Why?
Because in America, I was a very shy girl. I was like a nerdy girl. I was not confident at all. And when I got to Israel, I literally like remember thinking like, okay, I'm going to pretend that I am like this, like, they don't know that I'm a nerd. Like, I'm just going to pretend
and
I'm
also
cool.
like
And also I'm
nerdy
like this American,
Muncie,
like,
the exchange rate of nerdy Muncie to
and
cool
cool
Matasdorf.
right.
You probably exchange rates
I was
in
cool.
your favor.
Like,
Yeah.
I was cool when I got there. Also, my parents have really good friends. They sent me to Matasdorf because they have really good friends who had a daughter in 4th grade.
Gotcha. So you had an
And
in.
she spoke English, and they wanted me to be in class with her. Actually went back a grade to be in class with her.
Wow.
She's still my best friend till today.
Oh my gosh.
She spoke English, and she was like, I mean, we were in 4th grade. She was like the class queen. So I like immediately was her friend, and I immediately socially did very well. So it has to be that socially I was like very happy.
So in what ways was it
Well, the administration hated me.
hated you?
They hated everything about
Why?
me.
You were acting at... What were you doing that
I'm
would
very
get...
chutzpahdik.
Okay. Little chutzpah.
I say
yeah.
everything I think. I have very, I mean, you can't see, but I have very big curly hair.
Okay.
And they were very nervous, and they said this a few times, like throughout until after high school. When somebody is American, everybody wants to be like her, so they were using me as like an example. Like, you have to behave because everybody's going to copy you.
Because you're like that trendsetter. Like
Yeah.
in Israel, like they look America as
Like, it's like, ooh, especially back then.
No, I
Yeah.
have a sister who lives in Israel and raised kids not not in Mattersdorf, but in Sanhedrin Murchevet, which
Okay,
is
it's
also...
not so different.
Yeah, it's very serious. And their friends know that they are from an American family.
Right.
Even though they were
Right.
born in Israel. My sister's Hebrew is impeccable. People don't even know.
No, I know, but it's how you carry yourself.
Correct,
It's like a whole
correct.
culture. And I'm very
Yes.
proud to be American Israeli. Like, I love that culture. But the administration didn't love me very much.
So you're in 8th grade now. You're 12, 13 years old in 8th grade?
13, yeah.
13. Where did you go to high school?
So it was difficult. I got kicked out of elementary school in the beginning of 8th grade.
Did you really? What was the
I got kicked out every year, but they kept taking me back.
Uh-huh.
And then in 8th grade, they were like, you can't be in the graduation. And in Israel, I don't know how it works in America, but in Israel, the way it works is you go to schools, for high schools, for interviews, and they call your elementary school to get information about you. So they kept calling, and they kept saying, don't take her, don't take her, don't. She's a terrible kid.
So there wasn't an incident that got you kicked out. You weren't like...
Oh, in 8th grade?
Yeah, or there was.
I think I slammed a door really hard, and it broke.
Uh-huh. Okay.
I'm not really sure ever. Like, I really can't pinpoint any specific incidents why I ever got kicked out, but I got kicked out like 3 or 4 times a year.
I'm always fascinated. I think you could do like trend analysis for sure in America. Why do people get kicked out of schools and when? 8th grade, I went to South Shore. You got kicked out if you did something heinous at a weekend bar mitzvah. That was what people got. And there were people like the...
I was a very good girl. I
there
did
was
not
like
do
a
anything like that.
creativity though that you would see that like they were able to like group together averas that you wouldn't even think these sins that you wouldn't even think you'd be able to do them all at once in one weekend, and they found a way. Like
No.
these were wild 8th grade American
No, I was
boys.
a really good girl. Like, I didn't like hang out with guys. I was Shomer Negiah my whole life. Like, I didn't go to town. I was terrified of town. I was like terrified of people
What's
in town.
What does town
Okay,
mean?
town
In your,
is like...
where is that?
Okay.
Is that Ben Yehuda?
Yeah, like Ben Yehuda, Yafa, we weren't allowed to go.
Uh-huh. That was a school rule or a family rule?
School.
Okay.
I was a very good girl. It was more just like I was chutzpahdik, and I was like, I don't know, I had no patience for them. Like, they were very picky on me, and I didn't want to close my top button. It wasn't comfortable. So I opened my top button. So I like...
That was not the dress code there.
Yeah.
So at what point, again, you're now picking high schools, at what point do your parents realize this is not working out? And what point do you realize that, like, I'm not going to be in the system much longer?
So I didn't realize I wasn't going to be in the system until I was in Shidduchim.
Okay.
My father figured it out in 10th grade. So I finally found a high school, and then...
And what kind of high school was it?
I was tutoring over the summer. I'm an architect. I'm an architectural engineer. So I was tutoring over the summer in math. And the person who was tutoring me opened a high school for chutznikim, like girls who come from out of Israel, have a different culture.
Chutznikim means like...
Outside of Israel.
Exactly.
Like chutz.
Yeah.
It was an amazing school. The first year, my friend, the one who I met in 4th grade, came with me to that school.
Wow.
And it was an amazing school. We had so much fun. We were like 12 girls. And the second year, they got a new principal. And it was just like, it was horrific. She went to jail. Like, it was a horrific thing.
Mamash?
Yeah.
Are you being serious?
Yeah. She's not a good person. And halfway through the year, it was like a whole long story. She locked me in a classroom by myself for hours with like no food, no bathroom, no phone. And eventually my father came to get me. And that's when my father was like, you're not going back to school. Like, it's over. You're not going back. And my mother actually went and wanted to get my school transcript. And they were like, we're sorry, we can't give it to you until you sign that we did nothing wrong. And she was like, you can't give me those papers? And they were like, yeah. She's like, okay. And she just grabbed them and walked out and ran away. Like, my mom's like, she's like, you don't.
I don't know if you watch Nathan For You, which is a Nathan Fielder comedy show. He does that with a lawyer, whatever. That's a side point. That's only because of my deep, abiding love for Nathan Fielder, the comedian. So you leave in 10th grade. You have
my father realized in 10th grade.
A bad experience. What'd you do for the rest of high school?
I went to Australia.
You left Israel.
I went back to Australia. At the same time, my father, Professor Hirschberg in Australia, called my father and he said he's looking for teachers. So my father was like, okay, I have a daughter who's bored. So I got on a plane.
Grade.
I think by then it was like already 11th grade. Yeah.
Wow.
I went to Australia. I boarded at a Ger Hasidish home. And they all like had a lot of fun doing kirov on me. And I taught preschool and 2nd grade.
Did you
in a
graduate from
Hasidic
high school ever?
So yeah, I did. I had a cousin. She was a very, very special person. She had a school for Russian girls. She would go to Russia and take girls from broken homes. And she would tell their parents, I'm going to pay for everything for them. So the parents would send the girls because like it's like a load off their back. And she would give them a home and she would give them a school and she would give them some kind of Jewish education. So she kind of just like wrote me as a student in that school. And in 1 year, in Israel, every year you do Bagriyot, right? Like you do the few tests. So in 1 year, I did all 4 years of Bagriyot.
Wow.
And And by the end of it, I graduated high school.
Wow.
So it was like from Pesach to the summer, I just did like a lot of tests.
You're boarding in a Ger Chassid home. How would you describe kind of the religious environment of the home you grew up in?
So they're like Haredi American.
American Haredi.
But like they have like the Haredim, like my father's a big Rav, you know, my mom, like.
Did you grow up with television and movies?
No, like not at all.
Zero. No. Okay.
Like not even, no. Like very from.
For our listeners, that was a hard no. That was like,
no,
not a
at
maybe.
All. But like they weren't closed-minded.
Correct. No, you're.
My father was very into like, you support your wife. Like he wasn't necessarily like, oh, you have to learn for the rest of your life. You have to marry a learning guy. Like they were open-minded. I wasn't like terrified of my house. Like I'm very close to my father.
It didn't feel suffocating.
It wasn't like suffocating.
So, but I'm just curious, at the Ger Chassid home, that was a change for you.
I was like horrified at that house.
It's a different environment.
Yeah, and like there was a girl there my age, and she got married like a year later to a guy she like met once, and I was like, whoa, this is a very different world.
But it also kind of like you growing up in Australia, you spend time in Mattersdorf, now you're back in Australia, you have a home in Israel. This kind of expands your religious horizons in a way, just showing you different...
I've seen a lot. Also, growing up in my parents' house, my father did a lot of kiruv.
Religious outreach.
Like, we always had a lot of different types of people in my house. Like, I was never sheltered from the different types of people. It was just like, and this was like something that was always said, like, Habers don't do that. You're a Haber, Habers don't do that. This is what Habers do.
Can you give me an example of something growing up that Habers did not do?
Like that same friend, her parents went to America, and she did like a sleepover in our house with a bunch of girls, and my parents like, no, Habers don't do that. You're not going. Happens to be like one time I was really upset. They did like a Shabbos together, and I was really upset. My parents just were like, okay, they can all come here. And all my friends came over for Shabbos, and like my parents gave us the basement, and they didn't bother us. They didn't talk to us. There were certain rules and certain things that like, we don't do that. Like I was never grounded. I never had curfew, but I would never leave the house if my parents told me not to. There was this kind of like thing where like if my father said something, you don't go against it. And I still like for the most part wouldn't, because there's like a respect. Like we respected him and my mother.
Your bio, it's not your bio, like it's after your name as if it was like a PhD.
My FFB-BT.
FFB/BT. I've heard a lot of the FFB component. You know, you're raised in Israel. You're born in Australia.
I was raised in Israel.
Raised in Israel, back to Australia. You lived in a Ger Chassid's home. It sounds very frum and stable.
FFB.
At what point did your BT journey begin? When did you realize that like there was almost like a rupture? That the road that you were on is not going to take you all the way to where you want to be?
It's a dead end. When I got back from Australia, I went to college. I became an architectural engineer, and I wanted to live near the college, so my father like pulled some strings and got me a room on a Neve campus. And they were like, you have to go to classes. If you want to stay here, like you have to fill a certain amount of hours. So I started going to classes in Neve, and they didn't let me go to the classes I wanted to go to. There were like the cool classes that were for Baal Teshuvahs, for girls who were completely not religious and unaffiliated. And then there was like the Shalhava classes for girls who are from. And I didn't want to go to the ones for the girls who were from, because that was like learning Ketzer Shulchan Aruch. I wanted to go to the ones about like creation and God and like the cool ones, and they didn't let me go. And that's when it started like in my head, like something's wrong. I'm missing a lot of information, and I'm expected to know all of it. I'm not allowed to ask about it. And most of the times I got kicked out of school was for asking questions. Okay, I asked them like I asked them like disrespectfully. I wasn't nice about it, but like still. And then like when I got to Neve, they like wouldn't let me go to these classes, and I was very upset. So that's when I started saying like, I wish I was a Baal Teshuvah. Because Baal Teshuvahs get this like exposure to all of the foundations of Judaism that I was never taught, because it was just kind of like expected that I know it. It wasn't like anybody was like, oh, we're not allowed to teach it to you. It was just glossed over, because like, oh yeah, obviously God created the world, you know that. And I was like, but did he? Like, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it has to do, I feel like, with the way we socialize people and the way almost like belief is transmitted in the already frum community, in the already observant community, already Orthodox community. There is not an emphasis on theology. I happen to think it's by design. I always liked what Rabbi Sachs said, where our, like, so to speak, our dogma, our ideology, our theology has always been transmitted in the siddur. Like the way we daven, what we daven for is like the repository for our theology. But somebody, like, a lot of people wake up, particularly in like their late teens and 20s, and they're like, what's going on here? Like,
right.
They see their life ahead of them, and they're like, I don't know why I want to or should continue this, other than like, I guess I've been doing it, my family's doing it.
But you should ask questions. You're supposed to, when you're in your teenage years, it's called in Hebrew like Yemei Neorim, like the shaking years. Like you're supposed to shake things up and find your place. The problem is that nobody allows their teenagers, I shouldn't say nobody. A lot of people don't allow their teenagers to do that, to go and explore, because like you said, they're embarrassed, or like they think that my way is the only way and you have to be like me, and we don't give give people the chance to like go and find their own place in Judaism. Like we don't
You
trust
have this
them.
beautiful expression, Yemei Neurim, which is, there's a poetry in what you said, because
That's what the word is in Hebrew.
correct. Well, a nar is literally a teenager.
Yeah.
But the beauty is that the word nar also means
To shake.
To shake, or also like lehitorer, like to be awakened, to be idealistic, and to want to know like what's behind all of this.
Yeah.
That's a beautiful idea that Rabbi
100%.
Gedalia Shor has in his Sefer Or Gedaliahu regarding Yosef, who's described as a nar.
Right.
And he's this dreamer. He's awake.
He's the one who did it.
Exactly.
He's the Shevet that was like shaking things.
It wasn't just an age demographic, it was like a personality. I want to understand the roots of my own aspirations. So
Right.
let me ask you, you're in
At this point, I'm in Neve.
you're in Neve.
Yeah.
The juicy classes are not being open to you.
Right.
At this point, if I were to ask, how old are you at this point in the story? You're 19?
18.
18?
Yeah.
I'm asking 18-year-old Kayla. No, I just checked because your friends call you Kayla
Yeah.
at this stage?
Yeah.
Because it's like is that
It's a cute name.
It's not. It doesn't feel like a Matastorfi name.
No, and they could not figure it out. They were like, Tila, like ma, ich komm nach. They could not figure it out. Yeah, no, it's Kayla. It's an American name. My parents are American.
I literally just did a fact.
I'm named after
trying
someone
to
named Kate.
imagine somebody in Matasdorf named Kayla. It
Right.
doesn't.
You see, it didn't fit.
It
It
seems out of
wasn't
my-
a good match.
Yeah. I'm asking 18-year-old Kayla, what are your questions? What do you want to know?
I had so many questions at that point. Most of them were like, but the society's broken. Like, I don't know if I had the word society, but I was like, I don't like Haredim. Like, my whole philosophy was I need to get away from where I am. Because where I am right now is not working for me. I had a roommate. I'm still really good friends with her. She had like also been exploring and she found like Sephardim and she loved like the Moroccan, like whatever.
Sephardic culture, yeah.
And the way that she was just like exploring, there was like so much culture and like excitement in what she was looking at. And I was like, I don't have that. Where I am is boring and it's boxy and it's not for me and I don't fit in. And I keep trying to fit in and I keep getting kicked out. Like, it's not working. All I knew was that I didn't want to be shachol levan, right? Like black and white. You know, that's what they're called in Israel.
Sure.
Because all the yeshiva bachrim wear white shirts and black pants.
Sure, I did. I'm wearing white shirts right now.
And if you wear a colored shirt in Israel, it's like, you're not really still
Correct.
Haredi. At that point, all I knew was like, I don't want to be a Haredi. Like, I didn't know what I wanted to be. I just knew I didn't want to be a Haredi.
At that point, I'm asking 18-year-old Kayla, what do you think your parents want from you?
I think they wanted me to be Haredi. I think they expected me to be Haredi just because, like, okay, yeah, she's going through a hard time, but she'll fall into place. It wasn't like, oh, she better be Haredi or she's cut out of my life. But it was just like, that's what I'm the 10th of 11 and all my siblings.
Is that true?
Yeah.
Oh, that's a big family.
It's a big family and all my siblings are, Baruch Hashem, very from.
Are they Haredi?
Most of them are, yeah. At this
Really?
point, yeah.
Okay.
I would say most
And they were
of
part
them.
of that
I don't know.
system.
I don't want to like speak for them.
Correct, but all these titles that they're
They
describing.
fit
something
into the
super-
Haredi box.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha. They fit into that world.
Yeah.
My sister, again, is
Yeah,
part
that
of the Haredi
the Sanhedrin,
community.
like they're in Ramat Shemesh. They sent to Haredi schools. Like,
Yeah, and it was not working out for you.
No.
Was there a point where you even contemplated leaving?
no, not even once.
Why not?
Until the book. Because I think looking back, like retroactively, I can tell you, it's because I really, really didn't want to hurt my father. My father was the most important thing in my life. There's a lot that I'm not saying just because it's not for like public record. It's not my story to share. But my childhood, besides for everything else, it was very tumultuous. Like,
Okay.
there was a lot
Or other
of
stories.
other stuff going
hovering over
on
this.
that was causing a lot of like trauma.
Okay.
And my father was my rock. He was the only thing. Like, now, Baruch Hashem, I have grown, I have evolved, I have built a support system, I have a lot. But at the time, he was my like anchor. So I would have done anything to keep him happy. And he's still very much like a very important part of my anchor. He's not my only anchor anymore, thank God. I still rely on him and lean on him, but at that point, he was the only strong thing I had in my life.
So take me forward. So now you're in Ave. These classes are closed off. What happens next? Do you start?
I gave up.
You gave up.
Yeah, I was like, okay.
Gave up on what?
I was like, okay,
getting
I'm
into
not
the
going to be
classes or being
Haredi because,
Haredi?
like, there's a lot of gaps, and I don't really believe in this whole, like, cult. I really thought it was a cult.
At
And
that
I was
age,
like,
you were just
yeah,
like-
I was like, this is a cult, and I don't believe in it, so I don't want to be Haredi. The biggest, like, rebellion I could muster was that I sat down with my father when I started Judaism, and I was like, listen, I don't want to marry somebody who's black and white. Like, I want to marry somebody who wears colored shirts. Like, that was, like, my biggest rebellion that I could come up with. And it wasn't even a rebellion. It was more like, I just don't want to be stuck in this for the rest of my life. So this was my only way I could see out.
Uh-huh.
And my father, took him a minute, but then he was like, okay, but it has to be like the best guy in the best yeshiva. So it has to be like the top bacher in YU Smicha.
Uh-huh.
He's like, fine, but he has to be the best of the crop.
Did you appreciate that response at the time?
Yeah. And we found my husband.
Was he the best guy in YU Smicha?
Still the best guy.
The
Yeah.
best guy in the world.
Best guy in the world. And my father met him first. I asked my father to meet him first. I was very scared.
Before you even dated him.
Yeah. Long story short, I married my husband, and my husband came from like more modern Orthodox world, and he found Hasidus, and he's like a huge Talmud of Rav Weinberger.
Rav Moshe Weinberger.
Rav Moshe Weinberger, and he went to Leva Torah, and he's close to Rav Judah, and like that whole world.
We've also had
and
on.
he exposed me to like a whole new world, and I was like, oh.
Oh, so I understand. Your period of searching really began after you got married.
After I had both of my kids.
Oh, so
I didn't start searching until I was 23.
Oh, I'm so okay. So I'm like interested. I'm like, you're fast forwarding.
That's why I said before, because yes, when I was a teenager, I started asking the questions, but it's very quickly shut down. And I'm not the only person. And a lot of people have told me that this has happened to them, that like when they're teenagers, before they have a husband and kids and ramifications and responsibilities, they ask to make sure, and they're immediately shut down, and they're scared to ask again. And then next thing you know, you turn around and you have a husband and kids, and now asking questions is not so easy.
Well, not only that, if I may say, in a way, you shut yourself down because, as you said, like when you're 18 or whenever you're like first dating, you're like, if I start going down this rabbit hole, I'm never gonna be able to build a family. I'm never going to be able to get met. Like, so a lot of times it's like you jump out of the institutional world and you get to the first like
and everyone's
safety
like, but
boat.
shidduchim, but it's bad for shidduchim. And you're like, okay, I'm just going to shut up.
So in a way you did that. In a way you did that.
That's exactly what happened. Yeah.
Meaning you were like, okay, like I understand it's not going to be good for shidduchim. Let me get married. And now you get married and now you have a life of your own design in front of you.
Right.
And after you get married, where are you living?
So when we got married, we lived in Gruss, in Beit Vegan, in like the dormitory for YU Smicha.
Sure.
And we lived there for a year and a half until my daughter was born. I broke my foot when I was 9 months pregnant, and I couldn't climb up the steps to my apartment.
How did you break your foot?
I tripped. It's not
old
exciting.
Tripping. Okay.
Yeah, because when you're pregnant, your bones are weaker. And then I couldn't climb up the steps to my apartment, so we moved to Beit Shemesh for a few months. But when she was 4 months old, we moved to America, and that was the end of Israel.
Why did you move to America?
So YU Smicha had a rule that you have to spend a year in New York in order to get Smicha. They never enforced the rule, but they had this rule. And they decided on my husband's last year that they're going to enforce it. And my husband had already put in 3 years, and he was doing great, and he loved it. And I was like, okay, we'll go. At the time, we were like, it'll be like a Shana Rishona. Like, we'll go, like, have, like, shlichos for a year, have space, because we were living very close to both of our families. Like, we'll go have space, and then, like, we'll come back in a year.
Okay.
No big deal.
So you come back. Where do you move to in New York?
We came to New York. We moved to Washington Heights, to YU. It was
hard.
horrible.
Why was it horrible?
It was horrible. I was moving from, like, Ramat Beit Shemesh, Israel, beautiful.
Beautiful.
Like, to, like, Washington Heights was, like, it was just like
my issue is Washington Heights on Shabbos is very hard.
Oh no, it was the whole thing. The whole thing was just terrible. Like we moved after 6 months to Queens.
Okay.
And we lived in Queens for a year. And in Queens, I got pregnant with my son.
Okay.
So I had an 11-month-old, and I found out that I was 2 months pregnant, and I was like, I just was like, I was broken because I didn't want to live in America to begin with. And then like, okay, I'll do this year. But then once we got here, my husband got like sucked into his job, and like that was it. So I was already upset at that. And then we're living in like this like gross place, and now I'm pregnant.
And your reaction to hearing that you're now pregnant for the second time, just being real and honest.
Yeah, it wasn't, I mean, I love my son to death, but like, oh, it was not a good reaction. I remember like I was sobbing. I called my father and I called my mother-in-law. I called both of them, and I was like, I'm going to need your assistance, your help. My mother-in-law was like, it's fine. I'm going to come. I'm going to help you. My father was like, it's okay. This is what I wanted. Like they were both like very much supporting us, but we were like, this is scary. And they're very close in age. It was just like,
so you have two
it was
kids
intense. Yeah,
that's really, really hard.
Yeah.
So
that's when everything started to like
fall
so
apart. The cracks are already showing in the ground. When is your religious world getting really shaky, and where do the shakes come?
So throughout the pregnancy, I was very sick. I had, at the time, we didn't know, but postpartum depression actually starts when you're pregnant. And I was incredibly depressed, which makes sense. But besides for that, I was also very sick. And my doctor had mixed up my blood test results with another patient and didn't catch it. Even though I kept telling him something's wrong, he kept telling me that I'm a hypochondriac and I just am pregnant with a baby. I'm pregnant and I have
blood results mixed up.
He literally got the test results mixed up, yeah. And then like somewhere through there, my husband took a job as a rabbi in Flatbush. And I love everybody who I met in that shul. It was a really cool experience. The entire process of him taking the job, I was like, please don't do this, please don't do this, please don't do this.
Sure.
And he took the job. Our first Shabbos in the shul, we moved to Brooklyn, to Flatbush, and our first Shabbos in the shul was my son's bris.
Wow.
And when I gave birth to my son, I clinically died. So a week before we came, I bled out and my machines died. And I was dead for like 35 seconds.
It was like a very traumatic.
It was a
pregnancy.
horrible, terrible birth.
Okay.
A lot of bad things happened in the birth. I almost didn't make it.
Okay.
And then I woke up, and then we came to this new community, and I was a Rebbitzin, and also I was dying, like literally dying.
Physically, your physical
like
health was deteriorating.
physically, I was like not okay.
Okay.
My mother-in-law came to help me, but then my sister-in-law had a baby, so she flew back to Israel, and she got us a nurse who without that nurse, I probably would have actually died. My baby never stopped crying for 8 straight months. He slept for 2 hours at a time and cried the entire rest of the time. It's not an exaggeration. It was a terrible, terrible time. And during that time was when I just broke. Because I was like, screw you. I have kept all of your Torah and all of your mitzvos, and I have done everything right, and I married the right person, and I keep Shabbos, and
kept it together.
I wear my skirts, like I do all the things that I'm supposed to do, even though they're really, really hard, and you screwed me over. Like, I had a hard childhood. That's my pack. You know,
I already paid
my dues. Like, you know, they always say somebody has a package. Like, I already had my package, and I live in America, and like everything I know is across the ocean. And now this, I was so angry. I was like, you know what? I do believe in God. I do. I believe that God's the devil. And I got really, really angry. I was just like, I don't care. It wasn't like a rebellion and like, I'm just going to throw off my wig. It was more like, I don't have enough energy to be religious.
You were fatigued.
Like, I am trying to walk to the bathroom by myself. Like, that's my energy level, and I am not doing anything more.
The idea that you said, like, it got me emotional that, you know, there's some people who, like, when they have their first nisayon, their first challenge, their first test, so it's like, okay, that's a part of life.
Right.
And then there's like a breaking point where you have, and you almost like scream out, where it's like, my whole life can't just be challenge after.
Right.
Like, it can't. I need a breath. I need to catch myself because I'm losing myself, and my world is just becoming obligations and challenges.
So
and
it wasn't even like,
I'm getting lost.
It wasn't like I need to catch myself. I was suicidal, and I attempted suicide. I was like, this sucks. I don't want to be here anymore. I don't want to do this. Like, life sucks. Being alive sucks.
Existence.
Like, just being here. This is not a
What
fun
does that
place
mean?
to be.
I want to press, and obviously this is a subject that is incredibly sensitive. When you say you attempted suicide, you mean that literally?
Yeah.
And you have 2 young children.
I have 2 young babies. I mean, now they're 6 and 7, but I had 2 little babies. They were both under 2.
Your husband is working full time.
My husband was working full time. He was also a rabbi, and he was also a broker, and he was also very overwhelmed, and he was like checked out, and I don't blame him. Like, he was just like, I don't know what to do. Everything was just a mess. There was no communication. Like, there was nothing good. There was literally nothing good in my life at that point. And I mean, my kids are amazing and beautiful, but I couldn't see it.
You couldn't see. There's nothing good that you could see.
I literally lived in like a beautiful, breathtaking apartment, and I was miserable. I was like, I hate Brooklyn. I couldn't see anything good.
Was there a breaking point that brought you to the point where, like, I want to take my own life?
Yeah, it was, yeah. There was a constant repetition of me not being listened to. Like, in the hospital, the reason that I bled out is nobody was listening to me. I kept saying, I'm not okay, this isn't okay, something's wrong, and nobody was listening to me. And it kept having very dire ramifications, and nobody was listening to me. And then it just got to a point where it was the stupidest thing. I asked my husband to go to the pharmacy and get Motrin. I had like a prescription for like 1,000 milligrams of Motrin in a pill. And I was taking it constantly because it was keeping the iron migraines at bay. When I would get a migraine from lack of iron, I would literally like not be able to see. So I kept asking him to go, and he was like, I'll go. I'm going in a minute. I'm going. Relax. I'm going. And I was like, I need you to go before this one wears out, because then I'm going to get a migraine. Anyways, he didn't go, and the migraine came. It's such a stupid little story, but I was like, I can't do this, and nobody cares. Like, nobody cares, and nobody's helping me. I can't do this by myself. Nobody's helping me. God obviously doesn't care about me, so I just can't do this. Like, I'm done. Like, what's the point in living if it's so freaking painful? I can't do it. And I honestly believed that my kids would be better off. Like, I really fundamentally in my core believed that my kids would be better off if I died and my husband got remarried to somebody normal.
You were not thinking in a...
That's what I actually believed. Like, obviously now saying that, I'm like, hell no. That's my family. But at the time I was like, yeah, no, they would all 3 be better off without me.
So I'm debating now if I should linger on this story.
Well, let me tell you. So when my son was 8 months old, I found out I was pregnant. And
your second child.
With my third
with
child.
Your third.
This is all going on.
Yeah.
At 6 months, my mother came to America for a bat mitzvah, noticed that like something's crazy, and told my father he needs to do something. And my father got me a therapist, and there was like a glimmer that maybe things can be okay one day.
You went to therapy. This is after.
This was like 6 months after the baby was born. Yeah, this was like 4 months after that.
Okay.
And then when he was 8 months old, things had started. I got cleaning help, and I started therapy, and me and my husband started therapy.
You had, like,
and like
some structure to your life.
I got my kids in babysitting. Like things started being okay. I found out I was pregnant. And when I say I lost my mind, I was running around my room in circles screaming, yelling, and I had an appointment the next day with my father and a psychiatrist and my OB and everybody to like discuss if I should get an abortion. And my husband was like, you are getting an abortion. Like, we're not doing this again. The OB was like, you're gonna die. Like, you're not gonna make it. And I couldn't bring myself. Like, I couldn't bring myself to say, okay, let's get an abortion. I did not want the baby, like, in any way. But I was like, I can't. And I was literally screaming at God. When I say screaming, like,
it's so interesting that
cursing.
you got directed at God right away.
Oh,
You're
because
deeply
somebody
spiritual.
said to me, God put the baby there. It's obviously a good thing. And I was like, you're right. God did put the baby there. It's
I'll scream at him.
It's his dang problem. I was
Yeah.
like, I did everything I was supposed to do. I should not be pregnant. And it's his problem. And I was cursing, screaming, so angry for like 2 hours. And I was like, it's your problem. You put the baby there. You deal with it. Why am I your little punching bag? It's not fair. And I was like, I've been through so much already. And like, I'm 23 years old. Leave me alone. I still have another 100 years. So then I fell asleep and I woke up to a miscarriage.
Oh, wow.
And that was a very big turning point for me because I was like, okay, so he sucks, but he's listening.
When he is God.
Yeah, he is
When you say
God.
that.
I'm like, yeah, God sucks for doing all this to me. But at the end of the day, when
That was your
I
mindset.
finally asked for something, I never prayed before. That was the first time I ever prayed. So I was like, oh, praying works. That's when like I started asking the questions again.
Where did you begin with after that? Now your life has structure. You kind of fell apart, your early family life, the responsibility of kids and works and profession, and like you melt away in all of just the emotional heaviness of your life. You could lose yourself when you almost did lose yourself in a very real way. So now you want to like start putting yourself back together. What's interesting is religiously during this time, you're still...
Totally not religious.
Wait, what do you mean totally not religious?
As soon as my son was born, I stopped being religious. I was totally faking it.
What do you mean?
Like,
which one is it? Faking it or not religious?
I was not religious. I didn't keep Shabbos. I didn't keep kosher. When I was not in front of family, I didn't keep tznius rules. I didn't keep nida. Me and my husband had like this concept of the red line concept where like I don't cross his red lines, he doesn't cross my red lines. So I did what I needed to keep my marriage together.
Wow. Okay.
But that was it.
Wait. Pause. Because it's a very real story. It's a very real story of growth and change. And it's a story that usually happens in very private places that people don't share with the world. And it's a great testament to both your courage and the importance of your story that you're willing to share. At what point did you stop practicing religion in your private life?
As soon as he was born.
Do you remember the first time that you're like, I'm not doing this anymore?
Yeah. It was Shabbos. He was born Friday night. And the next day, I was in a lot of pain. And one of the things that helped with the pain was to watch TV because I could like zone out.
Yeah.
And I was like, forget it, I'm watching TV. That was like the beginning of it.
It's interesting because the beginning, I'm sure there are many rabbanim who would tell
me that I could watch TV. Yeah. A lot of the things I did, now looking back, were fine because of the state I was in, which is why my husband wasn't freaking out. Yes, I was not covering my hair, and yes, I was wearing pants, and yes, I was eating non-kosher out of my house. Also, at the same time, like I was eating because otherwise I was going to faint.
And your husband at this point is a
rabbi.
A rabbi.
Of a shul, yeah.
And he's not freaking out.
He did not freak out.
He just said to keep, like, don't jeopardize
He freaked out more when I was, like, mean to him. Because I was in such a bad place. I was mean to everybody. And he wasn't okay with that, obviously. So I'm not going to say, like, our marriage was amazing during that year. But first of all, if not for that year, our marriage is probably the best marriage that exists in the world right now.
Took a poll. You heard it from Kayla.
I'm just saying.
Greatest
it's
in the
probably
world.
because
of
what we went through.
Real.
Yeah, so we really figured out how to, like, be okay with going through hard things.
I want to go through this period. See, this story just took a major turn.
I know.
I wasn't aware.
I know, it's an intense story, but it's like...
No, but it took a major turn because I think when people see FFB/BT, they think cute shtick.
Right, it doesn't necessarily have to involve horrible trauma.
Well, they think it's cute shtick. I'll be honest, I'm guilty. Like, I saw it and, like, I read a little bit of the book. You read it and it's like, cute shtick, like, oh, we're all really Bali Tshuva inside.
Right,
but that's not your story. Your story is real. You left.
Right. Also, in the book, it's toned down a lot because I didn't want to traumatize, like, major amounts of people.
The readers.
And I feel like when I'm talking, I can explain and you can ask me questions. And, like,
unpack it
in
more.
a book, it's a lot scarier to read. So Mosaic Press was actually very good at toning it down.
This is an interesting time to to surface the fact that your father runs Mosaic Press.
Yes, it's a family.
It's a family business.
I mean, I don't, it's my father owns it, but like a lot of my family works in it.
At this point, you are not religious. You're 23, 24 now?
23.
We asked questions to 18-year-old Kayla. I want to introduce 23-year-old Kayla.
Okay.
My first question is, do you think you're going to stay married to your rabbi husband?
No.
You think this is not lasting?
I told him we need to get divorced. Obviously. First of all, you don't want to live in Israel, and I really, really do. That was like a very big, it's still hard for me. Also, I was like, you're a rabbi, and I'm not religious. And also, I was having a very hard time forgiving him for leaving me when I was giving birth. Like, he walked out of the room.
For a halachic reason?
No, he was
For
just
what?
like, I can't handle this.
Okay.
And now, Baruch Hashem, you know, we
But
got
you
over
had
that. But at
trauma
the
with
time,
that.
I was very upset at him. I really felt very abandoned. So at the time, I really didn't think that we were going to stay married. He was like, I mean, if that's what you want, but it's not what I want, and I'm not interested in that at all.
At this point, Shabbos at the Goldstein residence.
Yeah.
What's happening? He's going to shul in the morning. He has a job.
So he was in shul all day. He went to shul in the morning, and then they had like a meal. A lot of the times in the winter, he would just stay because mincha was like an hour later, and then he was just there, and I was alone at home with 2 kids. Sometimes I would go to shul for like kiddush.
So what are you doing at home?
I was watching TV. What am I going to do? I have 2 babies under 2. I was cleaning if I had energy to clean. Like, life was not necessarily like awesome at home. So I was trying to stay alive. I was taking care of my kids. And when my kids were not needing
And
me.
your husband knows this?
Yeah.
At what point, if ever, does your father discover what's going on? Because you said he was
when
your
he read
rock.
the introduction to my book. It was really actually super intense.
That
And he
was the
didn't like
first
it.
time.
Yeah, and he didn't like it. He was like, don't say that you weren't religious. You were religious. You were just going through a hard time. Don't say that you weren't religious. And I was like, yeah, but I wasn't. I didn't believe in God. I didn't believe in Shabbos. I didn't believe in the Torah. I didn't believe in any of it. I really didn't at all.
So let's start turning. This is a real trauma. We always talk about kind of rebuilding yourself after you go through something. And there were periods, you know, in my own life that I would describe myself in similar ways. Probably my 20s were not
Fun.
We're not healthy. We're not fun. And I had less responsibility than you. So my trauma was all in my own head and the narrative, but I couldn't find the energy to construct the heaviness that religious commitment sometimes demands and the seriousness.
It takes a lot of energy.
It takes energy. So you're really not religious. And
Yeah.
my question is, when do you start turning the car around? What's the turning point? Like, why are you still married?
I'm still married because my husband's very determined.
And you have the best marriage.
And whatever. We
but
spoke
you
about
understand
that.
what I'm saying. Meaning, if you were continuing on that path, things deteriorate.
Right.
What is the moment where you begin becoming a Baal Tshuva?
So my husband's Rav from Levat Torah came for dinner. He was like in America raising money, and he came for dinner. I don't think he even knows this, but my husband actually like just slumped. The whole thing came out. He just like exploded on him, and he was like, I don't know what to do. I don't know. She's like getting less and less religious as the days go on. My husband had opened up enough to be able to tell somebody.
Okay.
And the Rav looked at me and he's like, well, why aren't you religious? And I was like, well, I just have so many questions. And he's like, okay, what are your questions? I was like, no, I can't tell you. So he looks at me and he's like, okay, well, you know, like everybody has questions. Are you going to find answers? And I was like, oh. I had never thought about going to find the answers. I was like, oh, I have questions, so I don't want to do this anymore. And he was like, well, what, did you ever try to find answers? So that's really when I was like, okay, I'm going to find answers. And that became my project. And I put my focus into it. And with my therapist, it was a healthy way to get a project, something to do besides for like change dirty diapers. And that just became like my project. I had no intention of becoming religious. It was agenda free. I just wanted to know the answers. I'm like, I'm not being religious. I have zero interest in all of that. But I'm curious, how do we know that God created the world? What does it mean when we created the world? Why did he create me? What does that have to do with anything? And I firmly believed in God at that point, especially when that whole thing with the miscarriage happened. But I just wanted to know. Like, it was just a purely academic, agenda-free, let's get answers situation. Once I started getting the answers, obviously, it stopped being agenda-free. Like, I started actually becoming more religious.
When did you start to notice self-consciously that it's not as fatiguing religious life?
I love that you put it that way. That it's not as fatiguing as I thought.
Correct.
It's true.
You were out of sync. Just the energy that you needed to expend your religious life, it was like memorizing medical terms that you didn't know what they mean, which is like your memory doesn't work that way, as opposed to at some point you just kind of develops a rhythm. It has a cadence.
Right.
And remembering a song is very different than remembering all of the limbs and nerves in your body or all the capitals in some foreign country you've never been to.
Right.
When did you start to realize that shift, that there's a rhythm? rhythm. There's space. I could take deeper breaths.
It wasn't a
It's
shift.
not exhausting.
It wasn't a shift.
What was it?
It was a very black and white moment. I was learning, and everything that I was learning wasn't what I was taught. There's like this concept, let's say kashrus, right? There's the source in the Torah, which is really just the bare minimum. And then there's what we understand from that. And then there's this whole process that halacha goes through. By the time it got to me, it was so embellished and added onto, and so much was going on that I wasn't getting what was actually halacha. I was getting minhag hamakom, I was getting minhagim, I was getting chumras. When I realized that it's actually not this big, huge thing, it's actually just like this. So then I said, okay, I'll keep the Torah, but I'm not keeping anything else. And then I learned what the Mishnah is and how it's really just the oral Torah. So I was like, okay, I'll keep the Mishnah. Slowly, I found my community, and then like how it trickles into my community, and not the Haredi community. The Haredi community likes to like pack it on. When I realized, oh, I could keep the Torah my way, and it doesn't have to look like that. With everything that I became interested in, I'm like, okay, how are we going to, so even with covering my hair, I was like, okay, how am I going to cover my hair in a way that fits my values, but is also easy and comfortable?
And aligned with both the spiritual ideal and your own personal, emotional world.
But once it fits into your life spiritually, it feels right. Like
correct.
It clicks, and it feels correct. And it doesn't feel like a burden and like this horrible thing. It feels like this amazing, beautiful thing. And once I was able to do that, then I realized I could do that with everything. And I started doing it. I mean, I'm still doing it with everything.
At your lowest point, who was aware that you were not religious?
My husband, a friend in Brooklyn. I wasn't talking to anyone at the time.
You were just isolated.
I was very isolated. That's why I was in such a bad place.
Now, I told you before, I asked you permission if I could talk about this.
Okay.
I asked you, it's the only question I asked permission if I could bring it up, because I am quite fascinated, not by what I think it represents. I actually think in many ways it represents a part of your story, and that is, Kayla, you have a nose ring.
Yeah.
Now, it's not a big deal in most
big deal
American
in
communities.
Yeah.
It is a big deal if you grew up and went to a school in Mattisdorf. My joke is always when somebody gets a nose ring and I meet them, my entire inner dialogue is don't mention or notice
really?
the nose.
It's
oh my
so
God.
funny.
My whole inner
I forget
dialogue
that
is
I
like,
have it half the
don't
time.
mention the nose ring. But I do notice it. I'm not taking a position on the 1840 podcast whether you or your family members should all go out and get nose rings. It's really a decision that it represents, which is it is not a communal norm, at least in the American Orthodox community. It's certainly not a communal norm in the Israeli Haredi community. So at what age did you get the nose ring?
I got it 2 years ago.
And when
a year and a half ago.
Your father, your husband, when they reacted, they were like...
So my husband was all for it from the beginning. I've
like,
wanted a nose ring for a very long time. My friend was getting one, and she was like, come on, just come with me. I've been dying for tattoos my whole life.
Tattoos?
I don't have any, but I've been like dying for it. So at the time, I was writing the Tznius chapter. And I was going through like this whole process of I'm trying to figure out where I fall and how to connect to my dress to who I am.
Yeah.
And a big part of it was I am the daughter of Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, and Leah. I am a princess. And I know that like we're taught in Beis Yaakov, like you're a princess. No, like I am actually royalty. Like I'm an actual special person on this earth. I know Malka was saying that we're the chosen people, right? Like I'm an actual special person.
Malka
Malka Sinkovich.
I love that she starts with that, and we're going to have her back on actually. But
she's amazing. I love her.
Beginning with chosenness.
Yeah, so I was like, okay, so I have this lineage and this awesome like yichus. I am a daughter of Rachel and Sarah. Do you know who Sarah was? She was the queen of the world, and I'm her daughter. Like I'm her granddaughter. So I was like, when I get dressed in the morning, I look in the mirror like, would Sarah Imenu be proud of me today? And I kept telling my husband, like, I wish I could get a tattoo so I could always remember this, because I was feeling so inspired. And when you're inspired, you want to hold on to it. And then my friend was like, let's get a nose ring. And I was like, you know what? They all had nose rings. So I want to get a nose ring, and it's going to always remind me that I'm a daughter of Sarah, Rachel, and Leah. And that's all the thought that went into it. I went to the place, I got the nose ring. But then I started hearing the reactions.
Correct.
It happened like pretty fast. If I would have thought about it for like 2 days, I would have realized that it's a big deal. I was nervous. I'm an interior designer.
It's not the biggest deal.
It's not a big deal.
It's like a small enough deal that
it's enough to like people are going to talk about it.
Exactly. You can make the comparison. I hate to insert myself, but the parallel to me is when Shachor Lavan, people wearing black and white, which I was
put on a
black and white.
shirt.
No, put on jeans. Not a color
Yeah,
shirt.
yeah. It's
put
jeans.
on jeans.
Yeah.
And they start wearing, and I started wearing jeans to a base medrash. I remember in my 20s, and it was a talk.
Deal.
People noticed. It's not like we don't notice. We do notice.
People notice. First of all, I'm a designer. I was worried that it would affect my business. I was worried that people would think that I'm a bohemian, whatever. Yeah. It didn't at all. Nobody even notices. I called my father on FaceTime right after because I wanted him to like see it from me. We schmoozed for like 10 full minutes. He did not notice. I had to point it out to him.
And what he said.
And he was like, "Oh, come on, you guy." you're such a tsumistit. Like, you just
Oh,
want
such a
you
what?
just want attention.
Uh-huh.
And I was like, no, can I tell you why I got it? And he's like, okay.
Did he know? Had he already read the introduction?
No. This was like,
So
this
he
was
didn't really
like
know
2 years
what
ago.
was going on in your life.
He knew what was going on in my life.
Not to the full extent.
So when I started looking for answers, I called him, and we actually would learn together once a week. And like, he would help me a lot. He pointed me in a lot of the directions. So he did know what was going on in my life. So he wasn't so surprised. He rolled his eyes like, ugh. And I was like, can I tell you? So he's like, okay. So I told him about the Imahos and how I wanted to be like Sarah, Rachel, and Leah. He got very serious, and he's like, okay, I give you a bracha that you should be like Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, and Leah every day.
Beautiful.
So I was like, that's so nice. Now, when I was 18 years old or 17 years old, I got a second piercing.
That's a big deal in more Israeli Haredi circles.
And my
Second
family
piercing on
was
your
not,
ear.
on my ear. My family was like not having it. And my father at the time told everybody to stop driving me crazy. All the emos have it, and it's fine.
Oh, they
It's not a
stuck
big
up
deal.
for you.
My father stuck up for me to my siblings. So at the time, I was like, okay, he'll stick up for me again. It's no big deal. One of my sisters saw my Instagram story like a few weeks later. She screenshotted it and she put it on the group. She's like, did Kayla get a nose ring? And it was like this big discussion for like 5 whole minutes. And then everybody lost interest and it was the end.
No, to me, the reason why I find it so fascinating, there was a father who was talking to me about their own child getting a nose ring. He told me this story, which has always stuck with me. When they first got it, the mother was like, no way. And his husband like said, pause, wait a second. What's your issue? Is it wrong or it embarrasses you?
Right.
And we just have to be honest with ourselves. And I think a lot of times in our own religious lives, we're not asking, is it right, is it wrong? We're asking, is it embarrassing?
But what will people say?
What will people say? Is it the norm? Is it what's done?
So my entire life is challenging what will people say. I don't care what people say. I care what God says, and I care what I say, and that's it. And I'm not into like, I'm gonna be like socially religious. I'm religious to my Hashem, and that's it. I don't care about what you think about my dress. Like, I don't cover my elbows in general. I haven't found a good reason to. And like, okay, so some people might think that that's not okay, but I don't care what you think. I've learned the entire sugya. There's no good reason for me to cover my elbows. So give me a good reason and I'll cover my elbows.
You are the child of a prominent rabbi who has a platform of his own, a press.
He also wrote a lot of
Sure,
amazing
he wrote
books.
a great
Yeah.
deal, really a fantastic scholar. We have a lot of similar interests. Not only that, you are the wife of somebody, you have these big figures in your life, more traditional educators, rabbis. And then you have you who like shares a lot. You share a lot on social media, on your
do.
Instagram.
I know.
What's your Instagram account?
Questioning the answers.
What are you trying to accomplish, and are you ever concerned, or do you ever hear concerns from, you know, either a spouse or a parent or a sibling, like, oh my gosh, like, you're embarrassing enough.
Okay. I've had my sisters tell me that they don't follow me on Instagram because it stresses them out. They hate seeing it.
What you're sharing.
They hate my questions. They hate my answers. I don't know if they still feel that way. It could be that they follow me
And you
now.
love your sisters.
I love my sisters. I'm
Yeah.
really close to all my sisters. I was like, okay, so you don't follow. It's fine. Like I said, there is parts of my story that I don't share because it's not my story, and I'm respectful of other people's stories.
It's not your story.
Meaning,
to tell.
it's not my story to tell. It's somebody else's story, and I happen to be a player in the story and got like affected, like it was like a drive-by shooting type of situation. You know what I'm saying? Like I got caught in the crossfire, but it's not really my story, so I don't talk about it. Same goes like with my husband. When we were going through a hard time in our marriage, I didn't talk about it at all. Now that we're past it, and he also sees how much when we together talk to other couples together, we actually can help them like bridge gaps and figure out how they can, you know, make their marriage work.
Especially the notion, you should know, so many people reach out, and the thing that's not discussed enough are, we have this series called Intergenerational Divergence with parents and children.
Right, but what about like
within a couple.
intermarriage?
That is such an important topic, and every couple
it's very
has
important.
religious differences, and you navigated at the biggest
Extremes.
chasm, at the extreme, not only extreme because of your religious level, but also your husband was a public-facing rabbi, and here you are like living the secret life in your apartment is like really...
And we did it, and I'm like so stinking proud of us. But we did it, and that's why I shared.
And that's why you share. Because what do you want the world to see? Again, you have answers, and you have your book, your Instagram is called Questioning the Answers, and you have all these specifics, sneers, why you do cover your elbows, why you don't, rabbinic authority, but like at the heart of all of it, what do you want people to know?
I want people to know that they're allowed to change, they're allowed to find themselves, and they don't have to give up the things in their lives in order to do it. People think that they have to get divorced. People think that they're going to lose their relationship with their parents. People think that they have to leave Judaism completely to be themselves. You're allowed to change, and you're allowed to make your own little mix of everything. You don't have to fit into a box. And even though other people won't understand your relationship, it doesn't matter. You can make it work. It comes out in everything, but in relationships, if you have love and respect for each other, you can make it work. With God, if you have respect for God, you can make it work. It can work. You're allowed to change, and you're allowed to explore, and you don't have to be so terrified of what will people say, what will my parents think, what will my siblings think, what will my husband think, because like at the end of the day, I did all the things that everybody didn't want me to do, and they all love me. They're all proud of me, and there was a break. Okay? But they all come back, because at the end of the day, like, it's a big drama, and then they get over it. They move on to the next big thing, and you get to live your life the way that you want to live your life. Imagine if you're constantly trying to live your life in a way that won't rock the boat. Rock the boat! Who cares? It'll dry. It's fine. It'll be stressful for a minute, and then everybody will like calm down, get over it. People don't stay like transfixed on your drama for the rest of your life.
I don't know if I've told this story before, and I'm using again the jeans analogy, which I think is the male equivalent.
To a nose ring.
Again, especially if
yeah,
you're
it probably is.
Again, I'm not saying anybody who wears jeans, it's not a big deal, but like especially if you're in smicha, if you're in rabbinic school,
right?
It's a thing.
Yeah.
It's a thing. And the first time I did it, I hid them, and it was like so private. I was weird, and I was so nervous, like I'm gonna get like marked and tethered, and I was afraid to change in public. I'm still afraid to change in public. That's the honest truth.
I think everyone is.
It's very scary to change, because what I love so much about it, why I wanted to have you on specifically to talk about teshuvah, is that you reorient the whole model of what it means to be Baal teshuvah and what teshuvah is all about. I feel like, especially in the Orthodox community, especially people who went to day school and they went to yeshiva, their teshuvah process is getting back to their past. It's getting back to how I was when I was in seminary or yeshiva.
Not only that, it's also sometimes like, oh, it's Elul, let me like speak less Lashon Hara, which is beautiful, but like connect to Hashem. On Tisha B'Av, everybody was saying like, oh, I'm gonna like daven more kavana. And like, who cares? Do you know who you're davening to? There's like this shallowness in the teshuvah in the Orthodox world, because like, what, we're from? What teshuvah do we need to do?
Correct. I mean, we're already doing it.
We're already there.
Neither of us are. We're not knocking not speaking Lashon Hara, and we're certainly not knocking
No,
davening
if
kavana.
that's where you're holding, great.
Correct, but like the relationship, and to me, a lot of times it's not about the relationship, and it's about like what I would call very important, significant details. Then teshuvah for you is getting back to the point in your life when you were doing the best with those little details, which usually are your years when you have a little responsibility.
Yeah,
you're in yeshiva, you're in seminary, you're not working, you don't
very
have a family,
sheltered.
because that was the pinnacle.
Yeah.
But if the metric isn't the details, but the metric is the relationship, when is it healthiest? That's always going to be ahead of you. That's always going to be in your future.
Right.
You don't measure the strength of a marriage by like the first day of marriage. Like that's when it was at its best. Like that's a broken marriage. If your best day,
that's terrible. Yeah.
Like when was your best marriage years? Like that first day, really?
Right.
And the like the first,
Right.
even Shana Rishon, if somebody told me that, like those were your anybody who says their best years of marriage was like the first Shana Rishon, I'm like, that doesn't sound healthy to me, right? But to me, the model that you represent it's about the relationship, and it's ahead of you. It's always getting better. It's always increasing, because you're always changing, and the relationship's changing with you.
And you're changing, and own it. Own your change. Just do it. Just change. Like so many people that I talk to are doing things because they're scared not to do them. They have zero meaning for why they're doing them. They hate it. They're bitter and resentful, but they're doing it because they're terrified to change. Not because they don't want to change. They're in secret changed. They're just terrified what people will say. Let them say their things. They're going to say things. Let them say it.
Get it out of your system.
Let them say it. And then it'll be over. And you are left with a life that you like and a relationship with Hashem that leaves you fulfilled.
And you don't feel stuck. That religiosity
You're not
doesn't
bitter.
feel suffocating.
You're not miserable. And like that doesn't necessarily have to mean that you leave everything, that you get divorced and you leave the community and you move to Atlanta and you do whatever the hell you want. That doesn't.
I like how you chose Atlanta. I have a friend named Josh who listens frequently, and he actually says that about Country Club where I live in Teaneck. He said one time said Country Club in Teaneck. This isn't mainland Teaneck. This is off the grid Teaneck. He said Country Club is where people go to disappear. It always resonated with me because a part of me, I'll be honest, came here to disappear.
Yeah.
I don't want to be seen. routine. You spent years like that in your apartment.
Yep, like in my ivory tower. Literally, like this beautiful, gorgeous apartment that I literally never left.
So who are the people who are reaching out to you? Who are you talking to? What's the issue that they're struggling with? Is it young married people who are trying to figure
Most of them are married. Either they're married or they're like dating, seriously. But I would say the majority of the people who reach out to me are married. They have a few kids or no one kid, or like young families.
What are they scared of? What's the
Well, my husband's going to leave me. My kids are going to get kicked out of their schools.
What's the observance that they're usually contending with? Is it
it's across the board. No, not at all. Like Shabbos, you know how hard Shabbos is for moms?
Nobody talks about this.
It's terrible. It's horrific how horrible it is for moms, and nobody cares because men go to shul. They don't know. They don't care. Shabbos is a very long day where you have to watch a lot of children by yourself while serving a meal to all the men while having no help and no screens to help you.
And making it look good.
And you have to be gorgeous. You have to be skinny. You have to have your wig on. Your kids have to be matching. Your kids have to be clean. Your house has to be clean. Your table has to be beautiful. It sucks. It sucks. And that is not the Shabbos that Hashem made. And that's just one example.
I daven at 7 a.m. on Shabbos, and I give a shir after. And the shir is the highlight of my life. And I know it's very hard for my wife. I know it's very, very hard for my wife. So when we had our third child, who is just 2 months old, you saw our little teeny tiny baby upstairs. I even made a joke because the first time I gave the shir was actually Shabbos Teshuva. And I said, my wife didn't have to fast this year because she's nursing
just
and
had
it's
a
a
baby.
nidcha, so she didn't have to fast. But I said, she's going to feel Teshuva because I'm giving the shir again. But the truth is, I'm very sensitive to the fact of how difficult it is. I go all in on help. That's how I deal with it. Like, we got a babysitter for 7 a.m.
Right. Everybody deals with it differently. What pisses me off, what makes me upset is when, like, I have people come to me for Shabbos and, like, I'll see the girl with the baby and she's not even making Shabbos. I'm serving Shabbos, but I'm watching her and he goes to shul and he comes home and he eats the meal and then he goes to take a nap. And I'm like, what is wrong with you? Don't you like your wife? Like, don't you respect her? Like, my husband, for all of the things, there's communication. I say, this is hard for me. We figure out a way to make it work. For a long time, Shabbos was really hard for me. He went to Nate's and he was home by 10 a.m. and he helped me with the kids. And, we hosted, he helped her. Like, he didn't go to shul in the Shabbos morning, even though it was hard. At a certain point, it got easier for me. And he said, like, listen, I hate davening in the Nate's minyan. They don't sing. I want to go to the Karbach shul. And for him, it was like a very hard thing. So then we compromised in that way. And now Shabbos afternoon.
But you're having these conversations.
But the point is that I feel supported. I feel protected. He does all the shopping. He does all the cleaning Shabbos morning. I stay in bed Shabbos morning until 9:30 a.m. I read. I do whatever I want. And I come out of my room to a perfectly clean kitchen and dining room. That's really nice. Because of my husband. But that's because we had a conversation. He didn't wake up one morning. I was like, oh, let me do this for my wife.
Nobody spoke about this. Nobody spoke to me, and I'm a man, so I have a different... I was not sensitized to these things, and they're at the heart of the relationship. The way religious commitment and relationships interact with each other.
Religious commitment's very easy for a man. It's much harder for a woman.
They experience it differently, especially in the Orthodox community. One area that I scream at the top of my lungs, which is going to Minyan in the morning when you have little kids.
Yeah.
Nobody sensitizes it to me. Just to be clear, I'm not the Cal Ripken Jr. of Minyan. Those who know me know that. Cal Ripken Jr. had a record for the most consistent attendance.
Okay, thanks, because like I'm Israeli. I do not know this stuff.
Yeah. I am not that, but it's sensitized to me that like when you go to shul, like who's and it could almost
you come home to a beautiful Suda.
Yeah, and a lot of those sensitivities were lost on me, and I think some people are able to do it all with a smile, and I don't know, but behind a lot, you just made a face.
They're not behind closed
doors. Not
as
many as we think, and behind a lot of that can be people who their religious lives, their emotional worlds are suffering.
So that's who reaches out to me, because they end up turning their resentment towards Hashem and towards religion, because it sucks. Why do I have to do this to Shabbos? Not to get into detail, but like Nida. What rabbi decided all of these garbage? And Nida is primarily a woman's issue, right? Like a man just gets notified of the dates. Nothing else happens. And a woman has to do so much. And then kashrus, it's all the woman. She's the one cooking. She's the one doing the kitchen. It's all on me to make sure that my house stays religious. And I don't even know if I want to be religious. I'm not saying me. I'm saying these girls that reach out to me.
And you
they're like, this doesn't even mean it. Why? And one of the most common comments that are made to me by almost every single person is, because some rabbi decided, so that's why.
Some rabbi
decided that I should do this, so that's why. Read the Torah. The Torah doesn't say that I should do this.
Being able to distill practice into...
They have no idea why we're doing anything that we're doing. It doesn't say it in the Torah. We're not taught in Beis Yaakov, halachic, Masorah, our Masorah, how Torah came down to us today. We're not taught the history of, we're not taught how it works. My husband said something to me, what do you mean? It's like he was a huge Tana in the Gemara. And I'm like, I don't know what that is. It doesn't mean anything to me. Who's the Rambam? Well, I have to the Rambam said, who's the Rambam? Kayla Goldstein said different. There's no concept of like, this is somebody I should respect. We had no idea. I was never taught it, and I can guarantee you that nobody else was ever taught it. That these girls reaching out to me, they're like, what?
To the girls who are reaching out to you, obviously.
These women reaching out to me are like, why should I do this? And I'm like, let's learn it together. I'm not going to tell you what to do, because you're going to do it differently than me. But let's learn it together.
And your story, which I think in many ways, it's a story of teshuvah, even though...
Definitely.
Because if somebody were to look at you from the outside, you're not on the front cover of the seminary brochure.
No.
You're not.
No.
You're not. But it's a story of teshuvah because you have returned to your sense of self and you're at peace with Yiddishkeit.
I'm at peace with Yiddishkeit, but I'm also at peace with myself. So when other people challenge me, I don't get scared. I don't start getting defensive. I just smile and I'm like, that's a really interesting perspective. Do you want to talk about it, or did you just want to say your opinion? I'm happy to get into conversations. And like, I've repaired so many relationships in my life that I've literally written people off.
I think that's going to be my automatic message on my emails, is going to be that snippet
Is that
from
your opinion?
Kayla. I get emails from people, and I'm a people pleaser, so I don't have that confidence. And anytime somebody reaches out and says, you crossed the line, you did this wrong, you did that wrong, even though I believe in what I'm doing and what I'm sharing, I believe in everything that 1840 does.
Yeah.
And everything that you're doing is aligned. This is the mission. To help people be at peace. I'm not saying get a nose ring. I'm not saying what to do.
No, but the philosophy.
The underlying thing of be at peace, integrate your sense of self with your Yiddishkeit, find the rhythm in all of this, in your commitment. Don't suffer the rest of your life.
I'll tell you what, this is like an important thing. One of my mentors, Manya Lazaroff, she's a Chabad Rebbetzin in Texas.
Say her name.
Manya Lazaroff. She's incredible. I did a Shabbaton a few weeks ago. We had 20 girls. We went to the Poconos. We took cabins and we like just schmoozed for Shabbos, and it was incredible. It was amazing. And she was talking Friday night. We stayed up till 4 a.m. And Manya said this thing. She's like, if you ignore your soul, you're going to be unhappy, because your soul is a fundamental part of you. And your soul is a piece of God. So if you ignore God, you're ignoring your soul, and you'll never be complete. You'll never feel at peace and fulfilled, because you're literally ignoring an entire piece of yourself. Like, it's like I'd be ignoring my arm. You can't just ignore a piece of yourself. You have to take care of it. And your soul is a piece of yourself that was given to you from God. So you can have a relationship with God however you want to, but just have it. Like, do it.
I say that a lot. I began this project with somebody named Mitch Eichen, and I refer to him a lot, and we have these Wednesday calls. They're very intense calls. He has a different approach. He likes a lot of like the more academic answers. He has a lot of questions himself. And the thing that I always come back to him, and I tell so many people, is we have to make sure that in our conversations, that even though we're working out the future of 1840 and fundraising and finding the real academic answers of what was going on during the Second Temple period, all this stuff, I said, we have to just make sure that we're also spiritually nourishing ourselves.
Yeah.
Are we nourishing our interiority, the inner lives of our spiritual lives? How you do it, what you do. Because a lot of times he'll listen. It's funny. I remember he one time told me the first time we had Rav Moshe Weinberger on 1840, it's not necessarily the approach that Mitch is looking for in his life, but he said, I found it so uplifting. And I'm like, Mitch, you don't spend enough time nourishing yourself.
It's like a good meal.
Yeah.
It's like a good meal.
And it's healthy. It's healthy. Yeah. Kayla, I cannot thank you enough. I really find your story incredible. I find your willingness to share your story incredibly brave.
That's what I wanted to say before. It gives meaning to what happened to me, because I went through hell. It was a terrible, terrible time. There's like so much I'm not even sharing. It was really, really horrible. And I feel like turning it into something that I can use to help other people and grow from and make the world a better place, it makes it that it was worth it. Otherwise, I just went through it and nothing came of it, and it just sucked for no reason. Let something good come out of it, you know?
And I think more than anything else, the good that came out of it is you and your commitment. And your life and your commitment to your children and your husband and your family. More than anything else, I find that incredibly moving. And again, to our listeners, the book is called Questioning the Answers, published by Mosaica Press. Really astounding and really, really moving. And I'm so honored that you were comfortable enough to kind of share in a very real way what you...
I didn't think I would, but thanks.
I
feel very comfortable.
It means a great deal to me. I always end my interviews with more rapid fire questions.
Okay.
What book for you in your own journey helped you recognize this path of teshuvah, of this rhythm in your own life, aside from your own book, which we've already mentioned?
You're going to laugh at me.
No, I'm not.
It's called Crash Course in Jewish History.
By Ken Spiro?
Yeah.
Okay.
My husband bought it for me for Hanukkah a few years ago, and I loved it, and it really like opened up my eyes to like, oh, we've been through a lot as a nation, and we keep regrouping and like reevaluating and changing a little bit and like adjusting. And I could do that.
I want you to know, before I get to
love
the
that,
rest of
but-
our questions, I want you to tell something. There are people who knew us both who reach out to me, encourage us to interview, but they say, it's not your style. They put me in this box. You're too intellectual. You're too this. You're too that. And she has a different approach. And I said, no.
I need to know who that was.
No. I said, no, you're wrong. Because A, I don't think there is any one approach. I don't think you would tell anybody that there's any one approach.
No, the whole entire point is just encouraging you to find your own approach.
Find it, construct it, discover it. It's there. And you don't have to leave. You don't have to.
You don't have to.
You don't
it's
have
not like
to.
you can't find yourself without just, getting divorced.
Don't let the community be the sole arbiter of whether or not you have a place.
Right, yeah.
I could not agree more with that. My next question, if somebody gave you a great deal of
I
money
knew you were going to ask me that.
that allowed you to go back to school and get a PhD, what do you think the subject and title of your dissertation would be?
To be honest, I'm Israeli. I don't know what any of that means. But
They have
if
PhDs
I had, like,
in
a
Israel.
grand-
They have a doctorate in Israel.
Right, so if I could write a research paper.
Yeah, a research paper.
It would be why can't people get along and how to fix it. That would just be
What's the part?
the-
Like sociology, psychology?
just like all the different ways to figure out, like, I just need people to stop fighting, stop having wars, stop hating each other, and stop breaking up and just get along. It just stresses me out.
It stresses you out. I love that. My final question I always ask my guests, what time do you go to sleep at night and what time do you wake up in the morning?
I go to sleep at like 11:30. I wake up at 6 a.m. every day.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Were you always an early riser?
No, I forced it during Corona.
But not on Shabbos.
No, I wake up
Shabbos-
at 6 a.m., but I read.
Well, you read for 3.5 hours
Yeah,
every Shabbos
it's
morning.
amazing. I love it. During Corona, I started waking up early because I had my kids home, so I would work from 4 a.m. until 8 a.m. It was like my time to work. And then when Corona ended, I didn't have to wake up at 4 a.m. anymore, but I wake up now at 6 a.m. so that I have like an hour in the morning to just get my day started.
aligned.
I even get work done. It's quiet.
Kayla, I cannot thank you enough for your time today. It means a great deal.
Thank you so much
for joining
Thanks.
me.
I'm like so honored to be here. It's so
Oh,
cool.
stop it.
No,
Thank
for
you
real.
so much.
For real. Thank you.
So should Judaism be easy or should it be hard? When Yehuda posed this on Twitter, our friend and former guest of the show, Eli Rubin, quote tweeted, which if you don't know what that means, that's absolutely fine. He quote tweeted that question and he wrote, Karov Ma'od, which is from the verse that talks about tshuva, Ki Karov Elecha Hadavar Ma'od, that the act of tshuva, the act of repentance is always close. Yiddishkeit always needs to feel close and always feel aligned in your life. It reminds me of a quote that my dearest friend Josh Rosenfeld once shared with me. It is from Rav Kook in Oros HaTorah. Rav Kook writes in the 11th chapter in the second paragraph, he writes something quite amazing. I will read and then I will translate. Ha'adam hayashar, an aligned person. Tzarech lahamin b'chayev, you have to believe in your life. Kolomar, meaning to say, sheyamin b'chaye atzmo, that you believe in your own internal life, v'hargoshosav, and your emotional life, ha'holeches b'derech yishara miyasod nafsho, that proceeds from the very essence of your soul. Shehem tovim v'yisharim shehem molichin b'derech yishara, that's going to bring you in a way that is aligned with your life. HaTorah tzricha shetihia ner l'raglo, Torah needs to illuminate your path. She'al yada yira es hamakom, that through it you will see the path. Shesham hataos alula, where mistakes emerge from. Shalafamam tita hanefesh betohu lo derech, that oftentimes you can veer from. Ival hamayimid hatamimi, but the essential and enduring pillar must be tzarech lihios habitachon hanafshi. It needs to be an inner confidence, a confidence in yourself. I think in many ways of the curse, when the Torah has that awful list of curse of what can happen to the Jewish people if we veer, the verse that always stays with me is the Torah writes in Sefer Devarim in the book of Deuteronomy in the 28th chapter in the 66th verse. It says, V'hayu chayecha teluyin lecha mineged upachadata laila v'yomam v'lo ta'amin b'chayecha, which is translated, the life that you face will be vulnerable, precarious. You shall be in terror night and day, velo ta'amin b'chayecha, which literally means that you will have no assurance. This is how it's translated by the JPS. You'll have no assurance of survival. Velo ta'amin b'chayecha, I think, means that you will not believe in your own life. Your life will not be aligned with your Yiddishkeit. You will not have what Rav Kook describes of the Maimed HaTamidi, that central principle of bitachon nafshi, of that inner confidence, and saying there is a way for my religious life and my religious commitments to align with my internal emotional life. There is a way for these shapes and this passage to fit and be aligned with one another. And there is a way, no matter what my past was like, no matter what commitments I've had in the past, to realign my life so that my Yiddishkeit and my religious commitments are uplifting and are nourishing. And in my mind, being able to find that inner strength and that emuna bechayav, in the words of Rav Kook, that faith in your own life, that faith in your own religious life, is at the heart of the act of teshuvah. So thank you so much for listening. This episode, like so many of our episodes, was edited by our dearest friend, Dina Emerson. As we mentioned, this series is sponsored by our dearest friends, Daniel and Mira Stokar. We are so grateful for their support and friendship. It wouldn't be a Jewish podcast without a little bit of Jewish guilt, which sounds strange to say given the email that I read at the outset, but we always say it. So if you enjoyed this episode or any episode, please subscribe, rate, review, tell your friends about it. You can also donate at 1840.org/donate. It really helps us reach new listeners and continue putting out great content. You can also leave us a voicemail with feedback or questions that we may play on a future episode. That number is 917-720-5629. Once again, that's 917-720-5629. If you'd like to learn more about this topic, and we have such great stuff from the Teshuva series that we did last year, so make sure to check it out, our conversations. As I mentioned, one with Dr. Agnes Khaled, with Rav Judah Michelle, with Alex Clare, our episode of the Yablana Rebbe. Check all of them out. There's great stuff there. But if you'd like to learn more about this topic or some of the other great ones we've covered in the past, be sure to check out 1840.org. That's the number 18, followed by the word 40, FORTY.org, where you can also find videos, articles, and recommended readings. Thank you so much for listening, and stay curious, my friends.